Welcome, everybody. First thing I want to say is that we are recording this event. We have people online, lots more people online. So what we're hoping is that when we have that opportunity for open discussion, that colleagues will also join us online. So for those of you who don't know, my name is Jan Etienne, and I'm the editor of this book that you're going to hear a fair amount about. And at the front here, we have the contributors, and they will be reading something from the publication. We want to make certain that we have enough time for a bit of socializing, as well as, of course, sales of books and some book signing. So I want to also provide an opportunity for us to tell you that this is the very first event for the Social Sciences Festival here at Birkbeck. I'm not going to speak any further because what I want is for this formal arrangement to get out of the way. Our wonderful facilitator here this evening is Dawn Duca, former Birkbeck student, who is going to take us through all of this. And please bear with us because this is Hyplex. We've got speakers from all over the world, America, Dubai. We've got speakers who are presenting. So whatever technical issues we have, just bear with us. There is a program. As you know, we're not going to be handing out too much paperwork. We've gone back to this old-fashioned, style of sharing some of this with you. But what I want you to bear in mind that our program may well fluctuate a little bit. Okay, folks. So I think without further ado, I'd like to welcome our new head of department, head of school. And this individual, she's been with us for how long? I think it's probably since the beginning of last term. So a very warm welcome to Professor Sophia.
Well, I think I'm one of the formal elements that Jan would like to get out the way quite quickly. So I'm going to make my contribution very, very brief. It's wonderful to see so many people here, and I wanted to take the opportunity to give a very warm welcome to everyone. As Jan has said, this is the first event of a 2-week festival of social sciences here at Birkbeck, and we've got a really exciting program drawn from all parts of the school. And if you haven't already had a look, I would really encourage you to take a look at the program of events that are happening over the next 2 weeks. It's an absolute delight for me to see the festival kick off with a book launch, and a book launch that celebrates the collaboration between current and previous colleagues here at Birkbeck, and between graduates. And it's a wonderful opportunity, I think, for us to hear directly from the contributors, to have them talk about their work, to be able to hear from them directly, but also to have our wonderful keynote speaker. So in the spirit of getting things moving along a bit, it's lovely to see you all. Thanks very much for inviting me to welcome you, and I'll hand back over to Jan.
Thank you very much, Sophia. Thank you. Okay, now I'd like to tell you that I am co-editor of an American publishing house, and that is Lived Places. In a moment, I'm going to ask you to just give a round of applause to the publisher, as well as my co-collection editor. And I'm not sure if she's online. Is Reham online yet? Yes, she is. Okay, thank you. All right, so I'd like to call in Reham to give a very short welcome. Reham? Here? Okay. And what about our publisher, David? Is there? Okay. Could you call in Reham if you can? Thank you. Okay, so whilst we're doing this, please be reminded that, as Sophia said, this is indeed a Birkbeck project. Here we have individuals who have contributed to this publication, former program directors of the Birkbeck MSc Education, Power and Social Change. In addition to that, former lecturers of that particular program. In addition to that, we have doctoral students visiting Birkbeck for quite a considerable period of time. We also have a Birkbeck PhD student. In all of this, let's bear in mind that this project is indeed a project of Birkbeck. In addition, I want to share with you that because we are at a stage where there are enormous challenges in reference to the work that we do. I am one of the members of the Decolonizing Collective at Birkbeck. Our colleague William Acker is the chair of that particular collective. Is William here in the room? Hello, William. Okay, welcome. Thank you very much for being here. And in addition to that, I want to basically say that not only are we interested in concerning ourselves with those multiple, those simultaneous forms of oppression impacting the Black woman, we want to say to you all that we are indeed concerned about those diverse voices. And what you're going to hear about, you're going to hear about issues around class, issues around disability, issues around sexuality, issues which takes us a little beyond this engagement with the nature of those challenges. So I'm going to ask now, I think in the order that we take this, this is the change to this particular agenda. And the publication, which I'm hoping that you will have access to later on, 8 chapters in all. And each chapter, we're going to ask the contributors to give some reference to that particular publication. Okay, so first person I'd like to call the person who's actually produced that all-important second chapter. So would you give a round of applause, please?
I would like to thank you for coming. My name's João Machado, originally from Brazil, and my chapter is called Exodus, Decolonization in the Writing of the Self. So I start. At the border, the gender intersection, class, and race, ethnicity continue to define social subaltern places. After going through resignifications and readditions, racism and patriarchy still lack with strong traces of the past. Economic and social differences remain glaring. These differences, reproduced for generations and generations, occur also through the persistence of racial and gender discrimination. Therefore, problematizing this theme is necessary, since today's society discusses a social change regarding minorities and excluded groups, and often we do not know the history from the point of view of the fronterizos subjects, such as Black women, the landless, illiterate people, gays, lesbians, transvestites, transsexuals, bisexual, riverside dwellers, immigrants, convicts, and so on. The challenge remains for everyone, especially for us who are trying to break the chains through our research practice, to understand this intersection and its consequences, seeking to combat inequality and discrimination, tracing an effective way to contribute to the construction of an equitable society following the directions given by Black women. And if we allow ourselves to be touched by this ancestral knowledge, always collective, always attentive to injustice, we will be closer to building powerful bridges towards decolonization. It is not about idealizing the past, but realizing the past in us, even though the colonial power keeps telling us the opposite. This chapter is intertwined in a continuous circle where everything is in the process of transformation. It is the past, present, and future. It is ancestry. Black feminist research practice is a tension that links experiences and ideas, which results in the connection between experiences as a heterogeneous activity and collective knowledge arising from an associated point of view. There is a space between the individual, heterogeneous, and the collective experience, marked by common experiences. There is also a connection between Black feminist practice and Black feminist notions, which contrast with the dialectical relationship that connects oppression to activism, and with the dialogical relationship between collective experiences and the production of group knowledge. In other words, it is the challenge of creating connections between the Black women as a collective heterogeneous group and views of other oppressed groups. These are the factors that make writing, for instance, a strategy, but subverting the system, a wish to heal the wounds, a way of creating a fertile ground for the coming generations of women and men of color and white students. I highlighted the importance of Black, mestizo, Indian, peripheral, and lesbian non-binary narrative in the writing of the self, not only as a description of the vicissitudes of those who resist the oppressive and paralyzing heterosexual structures, the patriarchal system that camouflage, defend, and strengthen asymmetrical power relations, but to contribute to the view of hegemonic discourses. It is in the writing of the self that Black women's survival lies, because according to Anzaldúa, a woman who writes has power, and a woman with power is feared. Writing and reading contribute to this achievement and to the articulation of these dimensions through an autostoria perspective, situating and disseminating counter-hegemonic knowledges at schools and universities. Thank you very much.
I also want to remind everybody, and perhaps Birkbeck students, Birkbeck lecturers who are here, that this individual took on board this business of assisting us in understanding Brazilian culture, in understanding what it means to be a PhD student elsewhere internationally, engaging with students here at Birkbeck. So thank you very much for that. So the next person I'd like to call chapter 3, and she will give you the title of her chapter, is a former program director on the MSc Education, Power and Social Change. Welcome, Sue Dunn.
Thank you very much. I'm grateful to Jan for inviting me to contribute to this wonderful book. My chapter is called Decolonizing from the Margins, and it's a kind of autoethnographic account of how I got to be where I am, really. So, an example of decolonization. My route to the social sciences has involved a major shift in my understanding of knowledge and research methodology. This began with a collaboration with a colleague on a paper on reflexive pedagogy in 2006. 2 years later, I was asked to give a talk on widening participation, policy and practice to postgraduate students. This led to an invitation to become the third member of a team developing a master's program entitled Education, Power and Social Change. Putting Black feminist thought into practice. During this time, my colleagues and I put into practice what I now see as enacting Black feminist thought and an example of a decolonizing pedagogy. It was an opportunity to bring together my understandings and experiences of the effects of race, class, and gender to explore issues of colonization, power, educational reproduction, and transformation. As lecturers and tutors, we shared much of ourselves on the programme, using our identities to inform our teaching, building trust, as well as the co-creation of knowledge. Through our teaching, we put into practice several aspects of Patricia Hill Collins' thought through our engagement with intersectionality, the centering of lived experiences, and our exploration of hegemonies and the flow of power. We encouraged our students to use Patricia's Black epistemological approach in their research projects and enable them to find their own voices in their writing. As I reflect upon this programme and my engagement with it over 12 years, as lecturer, personal tutor, module leader, and sometimes as the programme director, I can see that it exemplified a decolonised programme of study, both in the issues that were addressed, the collegiality and authenticity of experience brought by the core team of staff, and the way that the students were valued for their experience and their insights. From this, I have developed the principle of a decolonised pedagogy that is applicable throughout the academy. So thinking about a decolonising pedagogy. This exercise in reflection and auto-ethnographic writing has been personally interesting and challenging for me. I go back to the opening statement of my chapter, which was a quote from Bell Hooks, to reiterate that until recently, I did not define or articulate my practice as a teacher and educator in theoretical terms, and did not see myself able to contribute to the decolonising agenda in higher education. However, as a result of considering my journey from a white identifying middle-class chemist to a mixed-race social scientist, I want to propose a concept of decolonising pedagogy that could be applied across the academy independently of an academic discipline. The challenge of decolonising the academy is complex and ill-defined. Is it challenging the curriculum, adding writers of colour to reading lists, introducing diverse positionings and understandings, providing better support to students from minority communities, exposing the colonial links of the academy, or all of these and more? Amending the curriculum will not decolonise science teaching, as knowledge is subject to independent verification through experiment, and students are required to apply scientific and mathematic principles to solve problems. Knowing that the name algebra derives from a book on the topic by a Persian scholar in the 9th century will not aid students in solving quadratic equations. Moreover, none of these approaches addresses the deep-seated and unarticulated discourse of white privilege within the institution, which is at the root of the need for decolonisation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sue. And I do also want to say to you that one of the passages that I will be reading, which is produced by Dr. Kerry Harman, will take account of where we are with this particular programme. And I remind you all that in terms of Black feminist epistemology, we are very concerned with the fact that every single author has tackled a particular way of thinking from any one of these formidable individuals, whether this is Patricia Hill Collins, whether it's Bell Hooks, whether it's some of the newer Black feminist writers who are working very closely with us and who are indeed members of the Womanism Higher Education Research Network. And so bear in mind that every focus, whatever the background of the contributors, focus very much on a Black feminist theorist in some way. And the practicalities of decolonizing the academy is the biggest challenge that we are expected to face. So now I'm going to call on Beverly Haywood, Dr. Beverly Haywood, to read from her own chapter. Thank you very much.
Hi everyone, it's lovely to be here and thank you for coming. So my chapter is called Conversations That Changed the Decolonising World. Universities must create organisations where everyone can flourish, irrespective of skin, colour, gender, sexual orientation, religion. Unfortunately, as practitioners, we are still facing the same issues that bell hooks. There we go. As bell hooks observed many years ago, she says, as backlash swells, as budgets are cut, as jobs become even more scarce, many of the few progressive interventions that were made to change the academy to create an open climate for cultural diversity are in danger of being undermined or eliminated. These threats should not be ignored. We certainly felt the effects of the backlash. Discrimination is pervasive. We were considered neither artists nor academics, but rather an embodiment of patriarchal's othering of us. We were working class female support workers. We were in our place, helpers from the mum's army, invaded spaces on the margins of academia. Nevertheless, there were those of us who fight on, with bell hooks as a source of inspiration. Since reading her work as a mature student teacher, I converse with her every day. She was the only theorist out of the plethora of dead white men to whom I could relate. I laminated her words and stuck them to my computer screen in the form of small starbursts. Her voice was inspiring. She said, to educate as the practice of freedom is a way of teaching that anyone can learn. That learning process comes easiest to those of us who can teach, who also believe that there is an aspect of our vocation that is sacred, who believe that our work is not merely to share information, but to share in the intellectual and spiritual growth of our students. With her passing in 2022, I felt the need to pay homage to this working class woman of colour who guided me on my journey. Her holistic approach draws upon the conceptualisation of education where the individual student need is more than just ensuring that a qualification is acquired. Accordingly, opening access and widening participation comes with moral and ethical considerations that cannot be overlooked. The university is a site of political and cultural knowledge production and dissemination, and as such, a site of danger for many. Bambara et al. Observe, it was in the university that colonial intellectuals developed theories of racism, populated discourses that bolstered support for colonial endeavours, and provided ethical and intellectual grounds for the disposition, oppression, and domination of colonised subjects. Here, racism, sexism, and elitism were promoted and continually reproduced in classrooms and research. Research is a product that fills books to be placed in libraries, and therefore as writers we have a responsibility. For in writing as a method of knowing, I was conscious of and reflexive upon the research process. Denzin and Lincoln state, sadly, qualitative research in many, if not all of its forms, observation, participation, interviewing, ethnography, serves as a metaphor for colonial knowledge, for power and for truth. The knowledgeable ethnographer embedded in the superiority of colonist anthropologists was a position I was conscious to avoid. Ethical research facilitates a reclamation of Aboriginal ways of transferring knowledge and troubles hegemonic systems of education. In this way, a feminist decolonial approach demands that the university, the curriculum, research and art representation, and art represents those on the marginalised groups, but in doing so, the cultural, social and well-being needs of the student body, participants and researcher must be considered in the care of the soul. And so representation in the academy and research must be undertaken in a meaningful way. Otherwise it becomes a form of tokenism. Unfortunately, in a constrained managerial strategy advocated in higher education, forgotten are the physical and psychological community spaces that yearn for creative ways of knowing. Nevertheless, they persist in pockets of universities and galleries. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, Dr. Beverly Haywood, just like Dr. Sue Dunn, well, of course, teaching on education, globalization and change, as well as education, power and resistances. And most of what you are going to hear about in the delivery, which I'm going to read from Kerry Harman, we will get a sense of where we are actually at with regards to this program.
Widespread needs to be under-theorized in educational research. Mertzer in 1997 points out that Black women have been viewed in dominant discourse as oppressed and least visible. Additionally, she recognizes that Black female agency remains invisible in the masculinist discourse of race and social change. Our invisibility within social justice work and activism has traditionally been erased from histories. Matthew Bella, who is pictured here, highlights the erasure of women's contributions within post-colonial struggles and suggests that the birth of the nation state ensured that women were erased to make way for the boys' class. That strategic erasure of Black women's contribution to social work justice mirrors the masculinist framing of social change, which is confrontational, visible, and radical. Matthew Bella highlights similar sentiments from Black women who were involved in the emancipatory struggle for freedom in South Africa, and notes that women felt their activism had been censored rather than made clearly visible in male-dominated literary communities, policy development, and liberation history. Opening up marginalized voices. Theorists such as Hooks acknowledge the importance of opening up marginalized voices and suggest the occupants of the margin offer a space of radical possibility and change, where alternative realities and new worlds are imagined. Adopting Black feminist principles of care and love in realizing the need for spaces to talk, to nurture sisterly support as we recover ourselves is highly necessary. The new age for decolonizing work in education across the UK education sectors is partly a result of global events, such as Black Lives Matter post the murder of George Floyd. This has produced a complex discourse in relation to social justice within the academy. By utilizing a Black feminist lens, we are able to delve into the nature of everyday acts of resistance, healing, rage, and joy that are often invisible and personalized in decolonial practices in education. We argue that social justice is Black feminist, and Black women carry this in their minds and take action to address incidences of inequality as and when they see it play out in their day-to-day lives. Thinking Black feminist is highly necessary to survive higher conditions, but at what cost to the individual Black female activists? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Natalia Douglas has a co-author who we're trying to get online for the moment. Until we do that, what I'd like to do, I'd like to read this all critical chapter written by Dr. Kerry Harman. And there is one feminist theorist by the name of Sarah Ahmed. And the focus very much is around complaints and the university's position in relation to neoliberalism. So I'm going to read this, and bear with me whilst I take some time, and please see this. This is a white cis woman who was the former program director for education, power and social change. So this chapter is revisiting the neoliberal higher education academy, a reflexive engagement with the politics of exhaustion. She says, I could not survive in the academy without the decolonial feminist collectives that continue to sustain, nurture, and renew me. They enable me to make sense of what I'm doing and to prioritize what I need to keep going on. But how to avoid having survival and continuing to exist, becoming individual acts of self-preservation, and thus reinforcing a neoliberal survival of the fittest mentality and the violences this produces. Some may have already felt a twinge of discomfort or even a searing pain as I call on Black feminist literature to discuss my ongoing white existence in the academy. And what about those who are no longer working on the program and the violences they have encountered? One of the TNS, that's teaching and scholarship staff, who developed the program many years ago and had contributed to its ongoing development for over a decade, has left. Another colleague who had helped the Education, Globalization and Change module and was convening that module using a Black feminist framework is also no longer employed. Is it just too bad that these academics no longer teach on the program? Is it mere coincidence that the one survivor is a cis white woman? The TNS teaching team all come from marginalized social groups. And this points to the gender, classist, racialized, and ableist inequalities associated with casualization in English higher education. Moreover, it also points to the links with the broader market forces that executive management teams in English universities have adopted wholesale with little struggle and little thinking through. While many academics, including me, have been involved in organizing collectively and participating in industrial action over a number of years to try and improve the working conditions for all academics in the United Kingdom, especially for those working on casual contracts, is the collective work I do and as active member of a trade union, including striking enough from a decolonizing feminist imaginary approach. Is there a time when white feminist academics need to rethink their survival in the academy? Is holding open the fragile space of a fragile program by continuing to exist sufficient? Some might argue the educational goals of the program and the work that it does justifies keeping it going. However, should a course underpinned by the concept of ontological politics be taught by a white feminist academic? It doesn't seem right. Returning to the central question, how do we academics in English university continue working together collectively to open up spaces for thinking and being that are underpinned by a decolonizing feminist imaginary? And linked with that, is it possible to do that in the neoliberal philosophy? The collection of essays in this book is an example of one way of centering and continuing decolonizing feminist conversations. Collective writing spaces continue to be a key element in enacting a decolonizing feminist imaginary. A collective and diverse team contributes to the vitality of the program, and the violences of neoliberalism desperately need correcting. And nowhere is this more urgent than in the neoliberal university. I'll stop there. Thank you very much. I think we may. Oh, we are. Okay. In a moment, just before we call on the publisher and Reham, I would just like, guys, could you just bring in some drinks for people, please? Okay. I would also like you to bear in mind that after the keynote speaker, we will be convening next door for refreshments. How are we doing there? Yes? Thank you. Okay, so do we have Tanya's picture on the screen? Okay, Tanya, are you there? Can you hear us?
Yes, yes, I can. Good
Oh,
evening.
thank you very much, Tanya. You are the first person online. Thank you very much. Okay, so it's with a warm welcome that I introduce Professor Dr. Tanya Burkhardt, who is a member of our Womanism Research Network. She is at Georgia State University in America, and she is going to say a few words. Hello, Tanya.
Thank you so much. I only have very brief remarks prepared, but I am so glad to see you all. What a full event. Thank you for making it HyFlex to enable us to also participate. It means so much to be able to be here. Overall, I've been very grateful to be a part of the research collective, but also of this project and the efforts of decolonization from a Black feminist and womanist lens that everyone who's present tonight is engaged in. So I am coming to you with gratitude and joy and appreciation to be here. I thought as I was listening of Audre Lorde, who wrote in Age, Race, Class, and Sex, something that I thought was appropriate to this moment, which is institutionalized rejection of difference is an absolute necessity in a profit economy, which needs outsiders as surplus people. As members of such an economy, we have all been programmed to respond to the human differences between us with fear and loathing, and to handle that difference in one of three ways: ignore it, and if that is not possible, copy it if we think it is dominant, or destroy it if we think it is subordinate. To me, understanding and rejecting the colonial underpinnings of these three ways of dealing with difference is a decolonial act of resistance and a space for new possibilities. In the US, current efforts to undermine and defund research related to equity and difference, as well as xenophobic rhetorics, pushing against immigration and other forms of and ways of knowing and being, are outgrowths of the idea that those who are not part of the dominant group are surplus outsiders, surplus people, not deemed worthy of knowing. Therefore, researching, writing, and working together in ways that resist making members of our own communities disposable disrupts this neoliberal hyper-individualism and moves us towards more humanizing approaches to our work. I think this book project, this coming together, this collective, are all examples of what this can look like transnationally in the current moment, and reject moves towards fascism and xenophobia. And therefore, I'm very grateful to be in community, to listen to all of the contributors, and also questions that may come up that push our thinking forward. And with that, I wanted to say good evening and thank you. And I look forward to learning more from all of you.
Okay, thank you very much. Do we have the publisher? Yes, okay, Reham first, or the publisher. Okay, folks, I'm just trying to get some drinks in here.
Compared to experience.
Oh, wow.
Okay, folks, I think we have Reham, my co-collections editor, just to say, co-collections editor, to say a few words. Reham El Morali. Are you there, Reham? Reham? Okay. How about David?
I'm
David?
here.
Oh, great. Okay, well, I'm absolutely delighted that David is able to join us from publisher, owner, Lived Places Publishing, to say a few words. Can we see you, David?
Yeah, is my camera's on my
Your
screen.
camera's on? Okay, never mind, we'll put your picture up, David.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Okay,
I'm here. I'm so sorry. I was using the bathroom.
right, okay, let's have Reham first then. Reham.
Hello. It's such a huge honor
Right,
to be here.
it's a
Hi,
little
David.
low, just for the moment. Okay, loud as you possibly can. Thank you very much, Reham.
Of course. Hi, everyone. It's so lovely to be here and to have this opportunity to listen from everyone who's contributed to this book. I've had the absolute great privilege of working through this book chapter by chapter, going through it, typesetting and everything. It was such a long process, and just working alongside Jan was so, I don't know how else to describe it, but like extremely proud. I became extremely proud to be part of this amazing process in general. All I really want to say about this book is that I got to know the authors through their writing before I even saw their faces or put a face to the name. And through all the chapters that you guys have written together and all the narratives and all those stories that you made so accessible, is just going to redefine and revolutionize how we approach textbooks, how we approach learning, and how we approach putting the human as the central figure in our teaching methods and in our writing styles. I think that this is something that Lived Places Publishing particularly focuses on, and that Jan and all the authors involved in this book managed to bring to life. All I can say is if you have been victimized by the degree attainment gap, the institutional challenges, the structural and social and cultural challenges, all the racism involved and all the burdens that are stacking up, turning us into this sphere of who has more oppressive characteristics than another, then I promise you, by reading this book, you're going to feel like you have been personally seen on a very deep emotional level. And on that very emotional note, I just want to thank everyone who's in attendance today. I want to thank Jan, of course. I love you. You have such a special place in my heart, and I hope that everyone enjoys the rest of today. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Reham El Morali. And I have to say that Reham is also guest lectured on our education, power and social change, education and social justice module. So Reham, thank you very much for your participation and for your involvement here. Great. So I now would like to ask the publisher to say a few words. And I'm sure I don't need to say anything about David's approach to publishing at Lived Places. Over to you, David. Thank you very much.
Thanks. I hope you can hear me well. I want to tell you a quick story about Jan. So Jan and I both have had the blessed opportunity to grow up and live in a home with somebody dealing with disability. It creates a wonderfully exotic, loud, exuberant environment. And Jan and I have frequently had calls where we talked about progress on books, and in the background, that cacophony of disability has been part of the discussion. And it, to me, was so important in recognizing the connection to this shared experience that Jan and I had as a publisher and an editor and human beings, back to what Lived Places Publishing stands for, which is publishing books about intersectional and lived experience with a specific aim on preparing materials that help students engage with materials on these topics. So Jan is a force of nature. The collection and the work that we're doing with Jan is incredibly important. And every one of the books that we've published now across 23 different collections in interdisciplinary areas brings this exuberance and this cacophony of voices and this wonderful experience we all have as intersectional creatures to bear. So Jan, thank you for inviting me into today's discussion, and thank you for being you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Now, I wonder whether we have Yasmin Ada online. Yasmin, can you hear us?
Hi, Jan.
Oh, wonderful. Okay. Now, we had a technical issue earlier and we could not get anybody to read readings. Yasmin has one particular chapter in this publication. She's teaching in Dubai at the moment. I would like you, Yasmin, to give us the title of your chapter, and if you can do a little bit of reading from that chapter. Thank you very much. And Yasmin also is a former master's student here at Birkbeck, the education, one of the early students on the Education, Power and Social Change, MSc. Thank you, Yasmin.
Thank you, Jan. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. So I was co-authored the chapter, Black Feminist Practice in Decolonising for Social Justice and Wellbeing. The section I will read is titled, Black Women Showing Up for Activism. Black women describe the act of showing up as activist work. As Venus Evans Winters, who you should see on the screen below you, as a way of bringing their lived realities to the research context. Being a presence and teaching with a Black feminist ethic of care in the education setting can resist and defy the expectation of not only what is considered activism, but also a masculine framework of activist work. Black women are not charging the gates of the academy, marching or holding placards. Showing up is an unapologetic manifestation of Black womanhood, femininity, and identity within activist work across educational sections. Black women have felt the need to take on hypermasculine expressions in order to maintain a voice, as argued by Mathieu Bellet. Discussing the experiences of Black women in higher education and the ways in which we are made to feel inadequate and unable to authentically present ourselves. We draw parallels with the challenges faced in the pursuit of activism and Black female leadership roles in academia. As Mirza argues, for Black women, strategies of everyday survival consist of trying to create spheres of influence that are separate from, but engaged with, existing structures of oppression. Black women showing up is not limited to the needs of their students. The sisterhood that comes from representation is a significant and critical part of the lives of all Black women. As Patricia Daly highlights, the importance of collectivity for the survival of Black women. For this reason, the representation of Black female activist teachers and educators remains a radical activist stance. For the students, seeing these women living their authentic lives and working within a violent system offers a much needed source of inspiration, strength, and hope. As a collective stance, Black women's showing up mirrors Alice Walker's call for a theory or a movement for the survival of Black women. Black culture, Black myths, spiritual life, and orality. Femininity and culture are equally important to the woman's existence. The exploration then of social justice within education goes beyond debates of curriculum representation and reveals a more complex discourse on how social justice is acted out from the activism of Black female teachers and educators. If that's the end of the section, thank you for that, Dan.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And I have to tell you that Yasmin is shortly pursuing her PhD, hopefully at Birkbeck. Okay, all right. Now, before we call on our keynote speaker, thank you. Nice to see you, Tanya. Thank you. Good. Before we call on our keynote speaker, I think what I'd like to do is just make sure everybody has a drink, okay? So we do have strong rum punch, we have fruit punch, we have Prosecco. And I'd like to ask, just give us just a couple minutes comfort break whilst we just open that up, if that's okay. Yes? Just a few minutes, a couple of minutes. Now, I have to say that the individual I'm going to be calling up, our keynote speaker, after she speaks, then we'll open up a little bit of discussion, a little bit of questions, anything that you want to ask from the speakers, from the readings, anything for the moment. Yes, we do want to save time for socializing, but I want to say that many years ago, with my first publication, Learning in Womanist Ways, I had the pleasure of this keynote speaker actually coming to Birkbeck and speaking and supporting me with that very first book launch. This individual also is quite a horse celeb. I have to also tell you that she is celebrated. There are so few Black feminist professors. So few. At Birkbeck, I need to take into consideration where we're at and hopefully where we're going. I also want to stress that some of these individuals, one Black feminist in particular, Gail Lewis, who Nandita spoke about, and who a lot of her work is very much part of the conversation. So her time at Birkbeck was most definitely sensational. We have to say, inspirational. We have to, we're proud that we have Black women in such positions to be able to take us through. WAHAN, the Womanism Activism Higher Education Research Network, is that network which is international. We have women from different parts of the world, different parts of the country, supporting us, participating. And this is that space that Bell Hooks speaks about a lot, that space to breathe, that space to talk about some of the issues that we face. And you will remember Sarah Ahmed in her publication Complaint spoke about those struggles, those invisibility, the very few Black professors that we have in this country. And one personal sort of feeling of exasperation that I have is that so many Black women are wanting to pursue a PhD. So many are finding that they cannot get supervisors in that particular specialism of Black feminist epistemology. And so there's an awful lot of rejection or sorry, can't help, go somewhere else. And it is left to some of the few, Black individuals at Birkbeck to give solace, to sort of, find, support, that type of some very excellent projects. And so this research network is an opportunity for us to spend some time thinking about what it is, thinking about those womanist principles. And those womanist principles, it's not just about our own positions as Black women. This is very much about how the wider community are involved. We think very much about, what it is that we're wanting to do, what it is that we are challenging, and the nature of support that we give. So every time we have a particular event, we think about that wider community. But it is not just a space where we're basically saying, we're talking about our problems, it's a Black space, that's it. We think about how we move forward with others, how we involve others. And the fact that what we're doing and the project was all about that kind of, not a change mindset so much, but getting individuals to think about that wider issue of intersectionality, that wider issue that if it comes home to a Black woman, until that Black woman is free, as in Nandita's chapter, the Women's River Collective took on board this fact, nobody else will be free until we are free. So I do want you to remember that as far as Tribunes goes, this keynote speaker has spent a lifetime supporting us, a lifetime in this London area, reaching out. All our publications are littered, with her publications, littered, with her words, littered with the thoughts that she has expressed to us. And I always call her a personal mentor, It is very much, we take this on board, any sort of real challenge, any real sort of issue, that outside the institution, this helps, this makes a huge amount of difference. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome to you Professor Heidi Surfer Mercer. Thank you very much.
So much for that lovely I've never talked to a room full of people with alcohol. But maybe that's the grand challenge. Or maybe that's decolonizing. I've just come back from Tobago. I spend half the year in Trinidad and Tobago, which is my home country. And so this party atmosphere is completely on track. The grand challenge, I thought, I've been given 15 minutes to give like a 2-hour lecture, but I wanted to talk about this idea of the grand challenge. And I'm an emeritus professor at UCL, and I've been reading all about the grand challenge that they have, and the grand challenge around decolonizing is called, and I must get the name, Grand Challenge in Cultural Understanding. And what does that mean? It's not decolonizing, it's sort of that anthropological getting to know the other. And so is it a grand challenge? What is decolonizing really about? Is it actually about that deep thinking about throwing out, some of the conventions that we take for granted in higher education? Is it about bringing in more foreign students to say, yes, we have Black and brown bodies amongst us, from elite mainly, and it's going to be increasingly more elite. So where is this grand challenge? What was really striking for me is reading the book, and thank you for your wonderful chapters, because in the book, somebody says about Bell Hooks saying that we should sit around the kitchen table. Who said that one? Somebody here in the room. That we should sit, Black feminism and the challenge that we present to decolonizing is that it is communal. It has come from the bottom up. It has come from our sense of exclusion and outsiderness. And decolonizing is about actually bringing that knowledge into the center of our universities, to the center of our courses, to the center of the way in which we think and feel. But how do we do that? And everything about the way the university is rolling out this grand challenge is the opposite of the kitchen table. It's a top-down kind of way of presenting social change or educational change. So, so next slide, come on. Yes, so I want to start by actually situating what Black feminism is to me personally. And I always think that the ancestral, calling up the ancestral voices, those who've gone before us, those who have centered us in the work that we do and the ways of thinking, our other ways of knowing, is absolutely crucial to understanding what colonizing really means. And for me, my grandmother, my father came on the Windrush generation, so I never knew my grandmother, but she was, without knowing it, a transformative agent of social change, just as we are, often unknowingly, through how we educate our children, how we share and love. And this is another theme in the book that's so striking, about the actual core of love, reciprocity, giving back. All those things for me is decolonizing, as well as, the grand ideas of knowledge and theories, but it's actually that groundedness. And as a Bible woman, because she was indentured laborers and enslaved families, and we only had the church, we only had the Bible. This is what we were given. We were culturally stripped, and this is what we were given as a way of learning and understanding and reading. And she would go out into the bush and she would teach other women, and those women would teach other women. And this is the kind of transformative agents of social change, working from the bottom up. And there were women like Ella Barker, for example, in the civil rights movement. We always hear about Martin Luther King. We hear about Nelson Mandela, but we don't hear about the women that actually drove the social change in those countries. The women in South Africa, in the townships, many of them I have had the privilege to meet, and the women who drove the civil rights movement, unheard of, unspoken. So for me, decolonizing is about all those hidden, unknown, unrecognized resistances from the bottom up. But how does this work within our institutions? One of the things that strikes me I have retired now. That's why I look so happy. Without any alcohol. But one of the things that has always happened to me is, like, people will call upon me as one of the very few senior people in a university to actually tell them what to do in terms of decolonizing, changing. If there's a Black student that's problematic, they will call on me. And I'm always asked to share private information about myself inside the teaching machine. And this is a wonderful quote from Felice Simmons from Black British Feminism. She says it's impossible to escape the body inside the teaching machine. We're always asked to share information. For example, the first job I ever got at South Bank University, I went through the ranks and I became head of postgraduate research. And I had to go to a board meeting, and the vice chancellor looked at me. Well, I was sitting down and he thought that was the coffee lady. And this is absolutely true. He asked me to pour the tea. And I said, no, I'm actually a member of the committee. And then he asked me, what does your husband do? And, all my life, I'm asked for personal information about myself. Do you want to hear another really funny one? So, I converted to Islam many years ago, and so colleagues know that by my name. And one day, and this is a really crazy story, because I had a pimple on my head, and I scratched it, and it became really sore. And one of my very posh white Jewish colleagues said to me, "Heidi, I'm so sorry. Is your husband beating you?" So we're always laid bare. We're always asked to, things that you would never say to someone is said to you. And yet we have these grand challenges to decolonize, but sometimes the everydayness of life on the cold face of the classroom, or the chalk face of the classroom, whatever you want to call it, is really a struggle. My head of department will never see me without administrator in case I take a case against her for racism or something. So you're always on your toes, and you're always the scrutiny. And sharing this private information is something that just is seen, that the students, that you saw in the first picture, they were holding up those posters. It was the I am to Oxford and I'm to Cambridge, like, please don't touch my hair. No, my father is not a drug dealer. No, my parents are not refugees. We'll ask all those questions because you embody difference. And I still think that that's the number one thing that we have to think about. So how do we go about thinking about knowledge differences? And here I say, it's another story. I'm just full of happiness stories. So in 2005, when Ken Livingstone, remember these days, I was on the African and Asian Heritage Commission for the Mayor's Office. And, when you're a busy academic, you don't get to go to the museums and, nice galleries and everything. But we had to go and visit them. So it was a pretty good job. No alcohol was involved. And I went to the Museum of London, and right at the very back of the museum, like near the toilets, there was the suffragette. You're nodding, it was the suffragette section. And I saw this picture of Asian women suffragettes. This in 2005. This is before the movie came out. But now everybody knows about it. And I never knew that we're Asian women suffragettes. I studied feminism for 20 years. And so I just thought to myself, I looked up a little bit about it, and I found out that they were the daughters of a Maharaja. And there was just one piece of writing around them, and it was from the governor of India, who said, they're such exotic creatures in their saris. So there they were reduced again to their exoticness, their otherness, and nothing serious about the campaigns. So the way that the white women were described was as, masculine and forceful, but they were seen as soft and gentle, floaty people in saris. And so the idea of the suffragettes as a narrative that has otherness and difference within it is just quite shocking to a lot of people. And I met Kate Gavron, the director of the suffragette movie. We were sharing a platform in the British Museum, and it was called Rebels in the Archives, looking at the archives and history. And I said to her on the stage, you didn't have anything about the Asian women suffragettes. And she said, wait for this, it didn't fit the narrative. So if you don't fit the narrative, you don't exist. And the power that she had at that moment in making that movie to include the truthfulness of the whole story. And this is what we do in our curriculum all the time. People make choices, but it is the Black and brown bodies that are expected to fill in those knowledges. And how can we do that? There's so few of us, as you know, there's just like a handful of Black women professors and the lecturers and everything. You have to do the original research and then justify it to come into the curriculum. So you can have all the grand challenges you like. And the way that I was looking at the grand challenge at UCL, they've got one postdoc of African descent interviewing white lecturers about what they think decolonizing would be like. That's their grand challenge, do you know? So I'm saying that, you know, really Black and brown bodies are the change makers. We are expected to be the change makers, to do all the work. One of my colleagues and you know, co-feminists in South Africa, she's written a wonderful essay. And I keep forgetting people's names, but she's written a wonderful essay about being the handmaiden. We are like the maids, you know, coming in and cleaning up and sorting out and, you know, putting things in order and getting paid very little or not at all. So this is the, you know, the kind of expectations of decolonizing. And so how can we decolonize when we're just in this position? Yeah. So here is my wonderful colleague, Chanda Mohanty. Do you know Chanda Mohanty's work? I really like this model that she has around decolonizing pedagogies from a Black feminist point. She says, if seeing race was all there, this is from Alcoff, another, she's a white woman. And, you know, this is another thing I have to say about the book. I'm just so proud that white cis women and women of all different classes and everything are included in a Black feminist book. And I have to say, and, you know, and I'm not proud of it, because when Jan said to me, I said, oh, when I was reading through, I said, but there's so many white women. There's more white women than Black women. And they're like, so what? Do you know, because that's another expectation, that Black women are the only ones who could do Black feminism, and therefore everyone's scared of it, especially in this woke times where you get accused of this and that. So that's another brave thing. So Linda Alcoff says, you know, if she's a white woman, wrote in 2000, and it's a great essay. But if perceptually seeing race was all there was to understanding racism, the remedy would be just to unlearn the seeing, just unlearn it, right? But what needs changing is not the seeing, but the ideology behind the visual perception. So it's the deep, deep understanding about race that we need to. And she says, you know, she has this model of what's really happening in universities. And this is written 2000, this is like 20 years ago, right? And she says, the main way in which most academics tackle decolonizing is through the tourist model, where you add and stir and you learn a bit about the abject other. For example, you know, there's always, they like, you know, child brides in Africa, and or you might have a section on women factory workers in Nike, you know, in India or something. You know, the kind of add in and just stir. It's a kind of tourist version. I went to Amsterdam, another story. I was in Amsterdam. They were interviewing me to see if they wanted me as a kind of under professor to give them some kudos. I didn't get it, but and they have a very big design and fashion college. And what they do to the students, they make, and they're mainly Dutch students, white Dutch students, and they make them sit at their sewing machines as if they were in India or somewhere, and ask permission to go to the toilet. And, you know, and not being able to just walk about and eat food and do whatever. They spend a day knowing what it's like to be a poor woman in Bangladesh, you know, and that's the kind of decolonizing that's going on there. That's why I didn't get the job. And so, you know, the idea of just sampling other cultures, or a little, you know, it's almost like waste porn, you know, it's kind of like, let's see how bad those other cultures are, and, you know, we're not like them, and we learn about it, and then we go back to our normality. So that's like the abject other that you learn about. Then there's the explorer, which is, you know, this cultural relativism. It's the kind of multiculturalism. I don't know if you remember, gosh, what's our foreign secretary's name again? How can I forget? But David Lammy was in discussion with that. She's a TV presenter that goes, a young woman. Huh? No, she's like a TV. Anyway, it was Comic Aid, and she was Stacey Dooley. Yes, Stacey Dooley. Thank you. Again, how could I forget such an important person? But Stacey Dooley and him had this huge row because she was saying, yes, it doesn't matter if we go and look at little black babies in Africa and give them toys. That's a good thing because at least they were getting a toy. They wouldn't have one before. And David Lammy was slamming her, saying, you know, it's racist. And there was a big row about it. So it's a bit like that with the explorer model. Again, you know, it's sort of them and us, the colonial gaze. And so, for example, places like SOAS, where you have special courses on Brazil and South America, and you learn about the other in a specialist way. Area studies generally is that idea of, you know, the explorer, and you know, the great British, you know, kind of history of exploring, you know, and all these TV programs that you have, which I'm quite addicted to, you know, all these guys going out and, what's his name? Simon Reeves.
Yeah.
Yes, it's great. Actually, I just watched it last night on Colombia and Venezuela and the Caribbean, you know, things I didn't know. But again, it's sort of a white man. It's so unproblematic for them, but it really is problematic going and looking at, you know, other cultures and then leaving. They just piss on you and go, you know. Anyway, so it's them and us, colonial days. And so huge amounts of our is in that way. Sorry. And then the solidarity is what Chandra Mohanty says we should move towards. The co-constitution of the local and the global. We are where we are in our countries because of where you are. And there's a wonderful essay by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, which is she focuses on the single story, the danger of a single story. And she says, you know, you can't have a story about, you know, how bad African governments are without understanding how they got bad and the history of colonialism and exploitation. So this idea of solidarity is actually understanding that history, decolonizing that history, and actually owning that history. And we haven't reached the point where anybody owns that history in our higher education institutions. And as one of the speakers was saying, the one thing that's been happening in the last year or two is all the Black history people and the Black literature people have all been sacked in all the universities. They closed the department down, geography, all those areas where we can actually look at history, geography, economics, all those things are being closed down and casualized. And, you know, it's just, and it isn't like there isn't a demand for it. Somebody somewhere has chosen what the demand is. Anyway, so yes, go ahead. So how do we move towards a decolonizing pedagogy? I think it's really important. This is a kind of guideline. What do we mean by equality and rights and freedoms? What do we really mean? This is a really dangerous and strange time about academic freedom and rights and who can speak. I mean, in America, and we're not far away, students on Palestine are being deported. I mean, just kidnapped and deported. And it's like, it seems to be okay. It's not like it's a violation of human rights. It's sort of seems protection, you know, protecting the state and protecting the wrongdoers, you know. And so what do we really mean by equality and rights and freedom in white Western institutions? And that's really important. These are white Western institutions. Knowledge is not neutral. Knowledge is, the knowledge that we think is neutral is not neutral. So we need to actually realize how big decolonizing is. We just can't say we're decolonizing. It's huge. And what are safe spaces and how do we arrive at our principles of engagement? Safe spaces like this room, I can say things about Gaza and Palestine here, which I can't say outside, you know? But that's just a blip because actually we can't do it in a bigger way. So what are safe spaces? And there's a very old book that I love by Kathleen Casey called I Answer With My Life. And that's what we do as tutors and teachers and committed activists in places of higher education. We answer with our lives. We give our lives to this kind of work and to our students. And the studies looking at Catholic nuns, Black women, and various other activists working in the ghettos in New York with the children in the ghettos in New York. And she says that the thing that really these women have in common is love. They just love the students. They give and they give and they give. And it's this reciprocity, this understanding, this embeddedness. They answer with their lives. So this is what we do, but as a price, it's a huge price that we pay. I had to retire early just to survive. I know Sarah's left, Sarah Ahmed. We've all had to leave to gather our forces, drink some wine in my garden, wipe our brows, and then come back and speak to you guys to say, keep the struggle. And what political and cultural change do we really, really want to achieve? When I first left, my job, I took early retirement, and I got a kind of consultancy job with Marks and Spencer, and they wanted to know how to improve the conditions for women in their factories in India and everything. I said, well, you're going to have to give them healthcare, they're going to have education, they're going to have childcare, they're going to have all those things. And then they said to me, okay, that's the end of your consultation. They barely paid me and I never saw them again. Because if you want real change, you've got to pay for it. And it costs. And you can't have cheap clothes from Primark. These are the costs. But if everything is on the profit motive, like you were talking about neoliberalism and capitalism, and that's the root thing. Just the very few have everything. And that's why they're looking to go to the moon and Mars. But anyway, that's another story. And so I just want to end with a quote from Audre Lorde. And I'll tell you one more final story. I was giving a talk. It was the Social Sciences admin, Research Association, that's it. And lots of people from industry and everything there. And they had a talk by this young man who's a real leader in chat GTP. I can never say it, GTP. And, they're doing all this research in a university. He looked like 12 years old. And he talked very fast. And afterwards, I asked him a question and I said, well, what about, with AI and racism, the kind of the normativeness of the way, facial recognition and everything like that. And he said to me, the master's tools can't dismantle the master's house. And I said, that's Audre Lorde. That's a Black feminist. He didn't know that it was Black feminists who had driven and actually created a body of theory that they are now using as normative. And that's what we need to celebrate our Black feminists. We need to actually put ourselves on the map much more than just being in this room, because really, we're driving AI. Thank you, Audre. And here she says, if I didn't define myself for myself, I would be crunched into other people's fantasies for me and eaten alive. I love that quote because she's saying, you know what? Don't name me. Don't think you know me. I will speak for myself. And she's speaking through AI right now. Thank you very much.
That's why we have you back. Very much. Thank you.
Can I have my drink?
Yes, you can.
She said no.
Yes. Thank you very much. We're wanting to have just a quick few minutes, yes? Questions. We'd like the readers, the contributors, if you can just turn your chairs this way, please. Yeah? Just for a moment and just a few minutes, because there are some things that we want to do. And my publisher is going to win the day if I don't basically tell you that he said to me, "Oh, Jan, you won't sell any books. Don't even order anymore." So I want to prove him wrong. And Debbie, selling the books. And I'd like you to spend some time milling around. We still have another 40 minutes, I think. So what I'd like is for, she's just outside selling the books. And can we have the rest of those drinks in? And Matilda, can you ask them to bring the drinks in, please? Okay. So I'm going to do a bit of moderating here. And this is for everybody as well. And that can include, Sophia, that can include you as well. That's okay. Any questions? Can you keep your glasses, by the way? Yeah. And can you bring where are the drinks?
They're coming.
Right. Okay. And so, as far as the project is concerned, you know, we certainly have a tall order. So many of us are sort of not dying out, but you know, it's almost like, I don't want to say we've left the sinking ship, but the actual energy to get on, do what we set out to do. The work of the Decolonizing Collective, which is not part of the Birkbeck management, stands alone, but over the last few years, a number of effective conferences, workshops with students as well as members of staff. So of course, the struggle goes on in many different forms. And we want to have a thriving body of students, you know, those inquiring minds tackling some of those subjects. This book, which I'm hoping that you will have an opportunity to purchase, aimed directly at those undergraduates. Every single chapter has an opportunity for those detailed lesson plans, objectives, learning outcomes, questions, and so on. So this is, you know, not just in the UK, elsewhere in the world, you know, for younger students in the main to begin to address those issues. And of course, using a Black feminist lens helps an awful lot. So if there's anything, and I just want to take perhaps just 5-10 minutes on this opportunity for some questions, something that you'd like to ask. Oh, great. Thank you. I'm glad we've got a volunteer. I was going to ask William to say something. Thank you very much. What's your name?
Onessa. So
Vanessa, thank you.
I'm a secondary school teacher of sociology. Hi Heidi, you're in my textbooks. And I know this is obviously very much centered toward undergraduate. I just wondered if there are any recommendations for how a teacher teaching, you know, the older years, let's say the A-level students, what I could do to ensure I'm decolonizing the topic. You know, we look at our feminist theory and the section on difference feminism, Black feminism is like that big. And obviously that's where we do our wider research. But I just wondered if there are anyone on the panel might be able to just give me some recommendations. Thank you, Heidi.
Yeah, but I get wheeled out to schools all the time.
Ah, you'll have to come to mine then.
Alcohol.
Thought we could sort that out.
But one of the things that really worried me, and is I went to a school recently in Pune, and they had a white male sociology teacher. He's obviously very charismatic, and his class was really young white men. And they were very, was that Guy Tate?
Yes.
Andrew Tate. I don't know how he could go off syllabus like that, but there's obviously room for interpretation, but these young men were very hostile towards women. And they had read Tony Sewell's report on race, what's it called? Race inequalities or something. And I've just done a massive report for the Institute of Fiscal Studies by the Deaton report. And it's huge and it's really robust and it's a Black feminist point of view. I don't get a look in on their syllabus with that because Tony Sewell is the main suggested. So who decides that? I used to know there's an Association of Teachers of Social Science, but I'm not sure they operate. But they're getting taught misogynistic stuff. I don't know if you know Tony Sewell. He used to be a shock jock on The Voice and now in the House of Lords. I say no more. And his thesis in his report for the government was that Black women are the cause of violence and criminality in the streets because they're failing mothers. And that is what they're learning in sociology.
Yeah.
How could that happen? It's like, I don't even know where to go with this. Who do I speak to? Because there is room for you to choose your stuff.
Yeah. We have had books come back in and then be edited and published again.
Yeah.
He does make some interesting comments in our books, and I always discuss those because, when we're looking at ethnicity and education, some of the things he talks about in terms of Black communities and Black families are a bit
scary,
shocking. So, a lot of students are like, oh, hold on. I tell them he's a Black man.
I know him personally. He is a misogynistic. He locked me up one day and, I'm just saying, another bad story. But, I'm just saying that these are people with baggage that have a lot of power and are influencing. So when we're talking about decolonizing, who is choosing? And say okay, you want them to from the syllabus and you're reading it, but you're a Black woman and you know differently. But there are a lot of white sociology teachers who don't know differently.
Unfortunately, I'm the only one in my school.
Exactly. Yes. And you can't carry the whole burden.
No, I know. Yeah.
But I don't know how to influence it.
I can speak from experience as a sociology teacher, previously head of department and head of faculty and a senior leadership, and I understand your struggle. I felt it for many, many years. It's still ongoing. Yeah. Unfortunately, there are many teachers in sociology, whether their background is in social science or not, who are also not really interested in challenging those thoughts as well. I would say the main thing is, especially to make it more manageable for us carrying that load, is ensuring that you're consistent with your message, reminding students that there isn't one ideology, no one ideology is factual. There's no such thing as empirical facts in social sciences. So already opening the floor is a form of decolonizing. Also reminding them also that yes, there are these different ideologies, but also these are the truths that are here as well. And they are valid, they're just as valid as what you are being taught in the textbook. And these textbooks will change. The textbook is just a tool in a toolbox. That's it. It's not a Bible.
No, that's right, absolutely. Right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anita. These are indeed some of the challenges of doing decolonizing education. Any other questions? Do we have any other teachers here? Any other teachers?
Yes. There you are.
Yes. Okay. Oh, hi. Okay. Hi. Kelly, any contributions or any questions that you have for contributors here?
I work in a really difficult situation, I guess, because I'm one of 2 Black teachers in my whole school. And I'm the most senior teacher in my school, and that's quite tough. And I think I go back to what you said about always being at the front for conversations around, change. If it's, Black History Month, call Kelly. If it's, a child who's Black, call Kelly. So I think that's really difficult. But what I would say is I think these environments are very inspiring. It'd be nice if we had more of them. So thank you, Jan, for this, because you invited me here. I don't necessarily have a question, but I just have a lot of love and appreciation for the experience. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
I'm a history teacher by trade. Yeah.
Okay, where is your school?
It's Putney. Putney
Okay.
High.
It
So
must be very mixed.
it's
Diverse.
it's not very diverse at
Oh,
all.
okay.
But I have to say, she did teach in one of the most diverse boroughs in the London Borough of Brent.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I have to also, express that, it is always interesting to hear about the academy, whether that academy is that secondary school sector, whether it's higher education. And just with regards to this kind of experience, Dr. Jha, some of your own experience elsewhere. I believe you are now, in this sort of UK territory. Any differences that you want to share, with us with regards to doing this particular task?
Yeah, I think for me is a lesson. It's just a path to unlearn, to learn, because I don't want to silence other voices, even when I am doing it at times, but I don't want to. So I suspect my writing, and I always ask someone to read me so I can have other perspectives. And as an immigrant in this country, it's very interesting because you want to fit in. And so I could notice that, but my name is Joel, but I tell people, call me Jay, because it's easier. But deep inside is a way of fitting in. And I'm always trying to polish my English because I don't want to be excluded. And it's since I got here, it's always been like that. I'm just really trying to fit in, to try to connect to people, which has been very, very difficult in a way because of culture and everything else. So I think my connection now has been through my religion.
Yeah.
I initiated in Candomblé. I don't know if you've ever heard, this is a Brazilian religion. And it's a way of trying to know myself and trying to understand this emptiness I've got and be less racist, being less xenophobic, being less homophobic. And I think that's my path, and since I got here, and lots of other feelings have erupted.
Okay.
So yes, so I feel a bit confronted, and yeah.
That's very helpful because sometimes when we speak of intersectionality, we do, remember that, those challenges, we've got to take them on board with reference to our interaction with others. And so, in a way, Dr. Bird, your own sort of thoughts around, some of the things that you've already heard, because neurodiversity, as you know, the very same way that well-being, is the agenda that we are, as members of staff, we spend so much of our time, focused on making sure that we get it right. But what about, when we speak about class, when we speak about working class identity, but also neurodiversity in this engagement, when we concern ourselves with what that might be and why we have that passion, why you have that passion for Black feminist epistemology. Do you want to share anything with regards to?
Well, I can definitely resonate with your story because being working class, neurodiverse, again, it's about trying to fit in. So I think that as a child, it was really challenging to be neurodiverse. So being illiterate, not being able to read, having a working class accent, which I may still have probably, I'm not sure, it's probably not so broad now. But yeah, it's very difficult in a schooling situation. So yeah.
Okay, all right. Now, as far, yes, who's that? What's your name? Hi.
I have a question.
Yeah, sure.
So I was born in Jamaica. How do we have these conversations in places like Jamaica where there's a lot of misogyny and maybe the culture is quite fixed? So how do we have these conversations in places like the Caribbean and maybe in some African countries where it's like very conservative and a woman is a woman, a man is a man, you have a whole heap of kids, and then you just, you know, where it can have an effect on society. How do we have these conversations?
Can I put that one on you then, Lisa?
I don't know how far I'll give it. You know, I think I'm not Jamaican. I'm from an Asian background, and yeah, we're very often characterised as being very conservative, very against this, very against that. The truth is, culture is not static. 200 years ago, people sent children up chimneys in this country, and teenagers got married. Things change. Every culture changes. Every culture is changing. We are changing as individuals in dialogue with one another. That's a tenet of critical theory. So I don't accept that all cultures are monolithic, wherever they are, or that they're not capable of change. But I think we have allies everywhere. Sometimes it's hard to see them, and sometimes we have to look a bit harder. But I know of many, many Jamaican gay men and lesbians, for example, that I've worked with over the years in Solidarity. I used to work in HIV and AIDS. So I know those people from that. We have members of our network who are from the Caribbean, who are working and struggling with us. Similarly, women in India, gay and lesbian people. You know, there are people all over the world. Sometimes when I spoke about people's voices being heard faintly, that's true in lots of places about lots of things, and we are being silenced more and more. Those of us that speak out that are different, we are being silenced, but we're still here. We're still here, we're still struggling, we're still chipping away at stuff. The trick is finding those people and finding a way to work together. But culture is never, when people tell you your culture is like this, because very often that's the thing, I think, that people tell us, oh, you know, your culture is very homophobic, your culture is very rich. What do you know about my culture? What do you know about my culture? And I think the way particularly Jamaican culture right now is portrayed, people like Tony Sewell have a lot to answer for, because my children's father was Jamaican. I don't relate to anything they say about Jamaican culture. Some of the most conscious, responsible family men I knew were Jamaican. So I'm not buying that as a narrative about Jamaica. I'm not. And we none of us should either.
Thank you very much. Thank you, then, Lisa. So it's time now just for one final question, because I just want a couple of announcements before we go. Anybody? One final question?
I would like to
Yeah,
ask a
sure.
question if nobody will. Just because we were speaking of education and then higher education, but I'm not a teacher, but I am a mother. I've got children in secondary education, and one of you mentioned how I think it was somebody online that mentioned how it can be so competitive, and our schools feed that narrative that you have to be competitive. We live in a neoliberal state, and then if you want to be anywhere, you need to be the first, and you can't leave room for anyone else.
Yes.
And I was my question would be for all of you, but perhaps mainly for you, Andita, because you mentioned something about education. So how do we go about taking those changes to maybe the Ministry of Education? Because we are thinking about changing higher education, but our children are going through the educational system and they go for a long time in that kind of setup, either misogynistic or racist or very competitive, where there is no room for understanding other cultures where there is very little room for actually embracing, having that kind of solidarity you're talking about. It's pretty much, we see a bit, we've studied that, next topic. And we still have the reproduction of certain views of the British Empire that do not leave much room for contesting these views. So kids are leaving school and taking the A-level exams, pretty much reproducing this idea of empire that it's so much good has been done. Why are people complaining so much?
Okay, so before Nandita comes in, I'd like to ask Dr. Sue Dunn just to, give some thought to that, mainly because a lot of Sue's background is around that widening participation. It's around access. It's around, making things, in a way so much better for non-traditional learners. So just a little viewpoint. Sue, yes, any comment that you want to make? Yeah.
It's very difficult, I think, and it's very invasive, this concept of neoliberalism and competition. A tale I tell is of friends of mine had a son who was about 8, and he was saying, "Oh, I've got to go to a really good school. I've got to get top GCSEs, or my life is over." And I thought, it's 8. Where is he getting this from? And it's coming through the school. It's coming through the culture. It's in the air that we breathe. How you counteract it, I think you just by example, by talking, by showing other examples. And I used to say to him, because my background is working with adults returning to it, you don't have to go to university at 18. Some of the best people I know and the most successful people I know dropped out of school at 14, and they came back when they were older and they knew what they wanted to do. There is a way in. It's not maybe so socially acceptable to do that, but it's not maybe what parents want for their kids. But there are alternative ways in, if that's what you want to do. If that's what you decide when you're old enough to make those kind of decisions, then there are ways in. So I think it's about perhaps trying to broaden the discussion a bit and saying this is what the school tells you, that's what society tells you. But actually, that's not the only story. There are other ways of getting to where you want to be. And maybe when you can get older, you can make an informed decision about what you want to do, rather than being shoved along a pathway like something in a sausage machine. This is the way you go. But it's a difficult conversation to have, I think, because of the peer pressure that the kids are under and of the very strong influence of schools, which are under the same neoliberal pressures as the rest of us. And it's a sort of neoliberal, it's in the air. It's in the air that we breathe. It's very hard to challenge it because it's just there and everybody talks about it. This is the way it's done. So
thank you.
Can I respond to that?
Just very briefly.
Very quickly. So, yes, I am not a traditional student. So I went to the Open University at 25, but also I did put pressure on my own children to go to university. So my son, he did an apprenticeship and he's doing very well. And my daughter did not go to university either, and she's doing very well. So I think as a parent, it's about nurturing your child and just trying to understand what they are interested in and what they want to do.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, now we're going to have one final question, and that question is from the chair of the Decolonising Collective here at Birkbeck, Dr. William Acker, at the back there. Thank you.
Oh, Jan, come back. It's not a question. I wasn't really going to speak to that, but just seeing the event and the wonder of it, it's just really to commend you for the amazing work that. How you really exemplify what engaged scholarship means, and the fact that you've got so many people coming into the space, and that you do it from the margins. You don't have a lot of resources, you don't have a lot of kind of support, but what you produce really outweighs, in a sense, all the things that happen within the system. So really, it's to really commend you and to really say you're an amazing person, doing some amazing work. I'm immensely proud of you.
And I do want to say now that we have a brand new head of school, already, you know, the support is there, the love is there. So, you know, I'm hopeful that things are going to get better, stronger support. Thank you very much. So at this stage, I think we've lost all our, oh, they are there. Oh, yes, okay. Thank you very much. Sorry, we can't see you. Everybody online there. I was hoping that, yes. Let's see. So Tanya, Dr. Burkhardt, are you there? Okay, you might want to say a few words. But I do want to say, you know, marvelous contributors, yes, to this volume. Yes, it certainly, you know, was a huge task to be able to think, to be able to share, to be able to knock our heads together to get this into place. So I thank you all for all your hard work. But I also want to say so much of what I could not do without you guys coming, representing, being there, supportive all the time. You know, I really do want to thank you sincerely. I also want to say that we have a very significant, important conference on the 24th of June. And that conference is against the wind. It is very much around reparative justice. And it is Black women's response to that particular challenge. We do have some information out there. We would like you to think very carefully about, it is a day conference. Our keynote speaker is Belle Rebecca Addy, yes, the MP. We want to also spend some time with variety of cultural activists, community activists, Black women who will be present. It's going to be in the main building. It's going to be from 10 till 4. And we will be sending information about that event. We hope you'll support that one too. Okay, and I also want to say thank you very much to this woman over there, Dawn Duker. The people outside, they're the ones that came to the end. Somebody online, is there somebody online who want to say a few words anywhere, not just our members of the network or publisher? Anybody want to say a few words? We've been missing you guys out. Sorry about this. Any final words from you? Anybody? I hope they can hear us. I hope so. Okay, so it's time now for some drinks, vegetarian patties, little snacks, and I want to take some formal photographs. Guys, please stay just for a while. Okay? Thank you very much.